I'm John Kelly. I'm the Reform candidate for Hazel Grove. I've been in politics from 2002 until now, and I was originally involved in the Labour Party, and then I moved on to UKIP, and I got involved with the Brexit Party. I was actually an employee of the Brexit Party for sort of 9 months from when it first came about until we all got made redundant after the 2019 election. But I headed up the Northwest, and I was responsible for the election campaign that got Henrik Obergard Nielsen and Claire Fox and David Bull elected as MEPs in the Northwest. I was actually a candidate myself, but I was number 8 on the list, so it would have been a miracle if I'd got elected. In fact, it would have been quite incredible. And I remained involved with, I've worked with Paul Oakden, our Chief Executive Officer, for many years now, more than 10 years. And when we started to fire up the engine again and set up the Reform Party, I was involved from day one. And until fairly recently, I was national organiser, which I was responsible for the whole of the UK structure. But I had a heart attack about a year ago, and so very kindly, the party is very much a human face. They didn't just say thanks a lot and kick me out. They said, go have a month off and then come back. I'm still part of the senior management team. I'm now head of operations, which means that whenever anything needs fixing, they send for me. And I'm also the candidate for Hazel Grove. I've lived here most of my life. I've lived in other places on and off, but I was born in Stockport and I've lived in Hazel Grove for a very long time, longer than I can remember. Obviously, I like the place, otherwise I wouldn't stay. I am getting a little bit fed up of some of the nanny state stuff that's going on, the speed humps, the surveillance, the constant bleating about cycle lanes and other nonsense which we just don't need. And hopefully, if the people have got the will to elect me, then I may well be able to make some changes to that and get us back on a road to a libertarian government that allows us to have our freedom and pretty much do whatever we want to do, as long as it's not naughty or illegal. Well, I think that overall that's a health service issue. I remember the treehouse. I think that mental health issues are absolutely now to the fore. I think more important than anything, though, we need to look at the way the NHS is funded, how it's funded. If you look at our manifesto, we're making something like £140 billion worth of savings. There are two key items that are there. One is stopping paying the big banks interest on QE money that they've had, because we've literally printed money, given it to them, and we're paying them interest on it, which is ludicrous. And then there's also these huge net zero subsidies, a total of £30 billion. This is money that could be directed to the health service, at least some of it could. And I think that it's clear that a focus on mental health is now required. And actually, I'm sure that the reason why we have such an expansion of mental health issues is twofold. One, we've got better diagnosis. And two, we've got a government that's causing it because they're upsetting and annoying people. I mean, they annoy me. It's not caused me to have mental health problems as yet. I hope not, but I have friends that, I can honestly say that some of their issues can be blamed on the way our society's run, and we need to make sure that we put the right measures in place in order to address that. It's funny you should say that because we didn't actually have time to get it into policy, but I'm going to give the guy who came up with it credit. A chap called Dylan Evans, who is standing for us in Bolton, one of the Bolton seats, has been paying rent for over 7 years. And the policy that he has put forward, and it is being seriously considered by the party, we are going to try and fully cost it and find a way of implementing it, is that if you have paid rent to a private landlord or the state, and you've never missed a payment for a long period of time, 5 years, 6 years, then clearly you've got a proven track record that you can afford to pay rent. The fact is, your mortgage is probably going to be slightly cheaper than your rent. So we need to, in the same way as students get a loan for their tuition fees and for their living costs, the government underwrite it. I don't see any reason why people with a good track record, we shouldn't push the banks into giving them the money to go buy a house. So in other words, give them a mortgage. Because if you are paying rent to a private landlord, then clearly you're not going to welch on the payments if you've bought your own house. You know, you've got a track record, you can do it, you can deliver, you should get it automatically. And it's ridiculous that we don't have that situation. Well, I think that the simple answer is one word: police. There was also a man who had his home burgled and they stole his motorcycle. He went after them in his car and run him over. Didn't kill him. Yes, he did. I'm sorry, he did kill him. And obviously that's a crime, and you know, he should be prosecuted for that. We don't want people being vigilantes. However, when the young man's funeral happened, there was a motorcycle stealing club that had to steal a motorcycle for his funeral. Now that is a flagrant disregard for any rule of law in this country, and it's time that we drew a line. It's not on to allow that kind of thing. And clearly everybody knew that this was going to happen, but there was no police presence at the funeral, and there should be. Absolutely not. Absolutely, I would. I mean, I would hold them to account, and I've got people who work with me. The former mayor of Rochdale, and a chap called Nick Buckley, who actually stood in the mayoral election, and he's standing as an independent in Oldham again this year. He's a force to be reckoned with, and I think, you know, if I were elected as MP, I would try to bring some influence into Greater Manchester. The problem with it is, and the difficulty, and I'm going to be honest, because there's no point saying, yeah, I can do that. Too many politicians do that. If you become mayor of London, you don't answer to anybody. You've got your own team and you deliver whatever you want to deliver. We've seen that with Khan and the mess he's making. If you are the Greater Manchester mayor from the combined authority, you have a cabinet which is made up of the mayors of all the 10 boroughs. And that essentially means that we can't ever have anything other than a Labour mayor. Because unless we sweepingly change our politics and we start putting Lib Dems and Tories and Reforms and Greens in across across the whole of Greater Manchester, and then it might be a different matter. We might have some sort of consensus, but Andy Burnham is essentially in a position where he can dictate, and I would consider even trying to sort of encourage a movement to leave Greater Manchester, to get rid of it, because it's not something that we had the opportunity to vote for. It's something that was imposed on us by a Conservative government, and goodness knows why, because it's not very good. I don't think there's very much we can do to mitigate the natural world. Clearly, there's nothing very clever about polluting our planet. I mean, Manchester led the world in the 1950s when it became the first smokeless zone. And I remember, because I'm old, I remember going to school with a scarf over my mouth. And when I got to school, it was full of black soot. Our heating systems that we had in homes were literally just open fires, and we improved the situation. We've continued to improve the situation again. There are some things like, for example, there's hydrogenized vegetable oil is now a product that's made in Bury by a company in the northwest. That's a diesel substitute fuel, which is 90% cleaner emissions. I think that we certainly is something that we could be using in our lorries. It would enable us to clean up our air. Diesel engines and domestic and industrial buildings produce most of the pollution, and I'm going to call it pollution because carbon dioxide is actually plant food, which is why the weeds are growing so well. Because we have indeed increased the carbon content of our atmosphere, but it's very, very tiny amount. And to be honest with you, the real problem that we would have is if we were getting down to sort of 160 parts per million, which we were almost reached at the last ice age. And once we get to that, all life on Earth disappears. So an increase in carbon dioxide is not a problem in terms of threatening the human race. It is a problem in terms of threatening our air quality. Clearly we need to do something about it. The measures that we're taking and putting in place to mitigate it are rubbish. We have vast quantities of wind power generation systems offshore that we're not even connected up to the grid, we're not even using. We're not making use of the modular nuclear power stations that Rolls-Royce have developed. We should be doing that because that's producing super clean energy that will enable us to separate hydrogen because hydrogen is the most abundant resource in the entire universe. There is no shortage of it. It will never ever run out. And we can run utterly clean vehicles on hydrogen using hydrogen fuel cells. So they will be both silent and emission free, and their waste product is water, which turns into water vapor and goes back into the system. So that's my philosophy, if you like, on the way the environment should be managed, and it should be managed. But as far as climate change is concerned, one volcano could swamp all our efforts in just a few minutes. Well, it's interesting that she should ask that question, and thank you for that question. It's a great question. We've now become the fourth largest exporter in the world. Now we are free from the tyrannical EU, and I say that quite deliberately, and I honestly hope that over the next few years the EU disappears altogether, because I don't think it's a force for good in the world. It's not democratic, it doesn't help us, and it's been moving our manufacturing industry and even some of our service industries into other parts of Europe, and it's been detrimental to our economy. Now we are free from that, and we need to drive that argument home and become properly free. We don't want Brino, Brexit in name only. We want truly to be disconnected from the EU. our manufacturing can return here. We can insist on it staying here. If we remove ourselves from the grip of the EU, we will be able to do what government has always done in the past, which is to help industries with the big investments that are needed in order to go to the next step and move to the next thing. When you look at where we are with manufacturing, we are at the cutting edge still. We are, in terms of engineering, sure, if you want something that's 50p, you go to China and you have it made. But if you want something like a mass spectrometer, then you could go to a British engineering company and you have it manufactured on a bespoke basis. And bespoke is something that we are good at across the board. I've just done a bucket list thing for me. Just bought myself a Savile Row suit. It's a one-off. I'll probably never be able to afford to do it again. But it's British cloth, it's British made. And the more and more we can do that, the more and more our industry will grow. It's a great idea. I'm not always in favour of such things, but 3 years is not such an onerous length of time. That when she completed that course, there was actually no jobs. And bear in mind that the health service is one homogenous unit. It's the largest, one of the third largest organisation in the world, I believe. Their HR people should know exactly how many midwives are going to leave through retirement, through going on to other things, through road accidents, whatever. To within a Twitter, they will know how many people they need, and they should be able to tailor the university courses to suit that, so they get the right number of people qualifying, and that everybody who qualifies can have a job, knowing, of course, that some will say, well, actually, no, I want to go into photography or whatever. So I think that it really needs to be better managed, and that doesn't mean more money for the management. It just means for them to actually get and do their job. Well, it's a very complex situation. It's utterly horrific. We have a situation where politicians, and I would call them political trash, in certain parts of the world, are using that situation in Palestine and Israel to enhance their own prospects, in the same way as Margaret Thatcher used the Falklands to make sure she got re-elected. Tony Blair did the same with the Gulf War. We have the Iranian regime that are using the situation in the Middle East. They're funding Hamas. We've got an unpopular Israeli government that have indulged in this in a way that they didn't have to, in order to rouse the people and to try and stay in power. And I think that fundamentally that is what's behind it, but that doesn't detract from the fact that we have innocent Palestinians being killed by Israeli soldiers who are probably one of the best armies in the world. They are professionals. We also have a political group called Hamas who are essentially advocating genocide, and they don't represent the people of Palestine, but we need to do something about them. And in the end, we will have to force a two-state solution. and we will have to get a grip of those involved and make sure that we push them down the road of a negotiated peace that's a lasting negotiated peace, and something that we can, the world, a community, if you like, can assist in maintaining that. If you look at, the nearest thing we have to it is Northern Ireland. I mean, that problem reared its ugly head in 1969 when I happened to be there on holiday. But, we've managed to solve it, and we've managed to solve it. Bless him, it was Bill Clinton who was, one of the people who intervened. And suddenly, because of the American president coming along, the people started to listen. And we've had a reasonable situation there for some time now, and hopefully that's going to continue. And I'm sure we can achieve the same thing in that particular part of the world, the Middle East. Indeed. Yeah. Yes. Yes. All transport. Yes. Imperative. No, no, and no. Yes. 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 By the canal, near the navigation. Well, I'm unable to do that really. If people want to email me at john.kelly@reformparty.uk, I will do my best, and I've got 1,200 emails in my inbox at the moment, and I'll be going back sitting there till midnight tonight answering them. I try to answer them as best as I can, and try to put some detail. But obviously, for most of these issues, I could write an essay very easily, but I will try to sort of send back a bullet pointed hit list of what I think can be done. That we have printed money under QE, we've given it to banks, and we're now paying them interest on those deposits, which is utterly ludicrous. That's like me giving you 100 quid, Darren, and you charging me £1 a week. It's not going to happen. Well, it's funding the election from specific donations for specific things, and we've had some very generous people. Obviously, people who put in large amounts of money tend to sort of say, I want it for specific things. But obviously, in the last 12 months, we've had several massive increases in membership. I was at the Battle of Ideas, which is the Academy of Ideas run by Claire Fox, in November, not last year, the year before. And there was, I think it was one of the incidences where the Conservative Party shot themselves in the foot, and our membership rocketed by thousands. And it keeps going up in little spurts. And then obviously 5 weeks ago, when Nigel Farage decided he was going to run as a candidate and return to frontline politics, our membership went up by 12,000. Now, I am one of the few people that have access to the entire database. All our candidates normally have access to the data that reflects their seat. But as head of operations, I have the whole country. And I can absolutely assure you that the number of supporters has rocketed, and most of them, the members, are paying £25 each. And then in addition to that, I spend quite a lot of time in our head office in Ashby, and the support team, a wonderful set of young people, well, mostly young people who work for us. They are speaking to people who are putting in not huge donations, but substantial donations, £100, £50, nothing to do with their membership, just have 50 quid, have 100 quid, even occasionally have £1,000. So that's where the money's coming from. It's not coming from anywhere else. Thanks for that, whoever asked that question, because it was me that spent the last 3 years putting the infrastructure in place, and up until June last year, I was responsible for managing all of the infrastructure. We have a fantastic set of volunteers. They are all doing the very best they can, and if you look at what's just happened, the Prime Minister didn't even have the wit to take an umbrella, but he went out in the rain and announced that he was going to the polls and he was having a general election. And that left us the shortest possible time that I've ever experienced to get 600 plus candidates nominated. And bear in mind that our then leader, Richard Tice, has been saying for the last 2 years, we're going to put 620 candidates up. And we've managed 619. Now that is, it's been me that's largely been responsible for coordinating the nominations bit, not the selection bit. That's been nothing to do with me. But the nominations bit, that's largely been coordinated by me and a team of people who have been absolutely dedicated. And I think that proves conclusively that we've got the infrastructure in place. I mean, this election is all about reform. It's all about the Tories running away from reform. They're frightened of us. And they've called this election in the way that they have because they thought that was going to give them the best chance of defeating us on advantage. I mean, bear in mind that I was in the House of Lords last Wednesday I was in Millbank House last Wednesday, which is Claire Fox's office, because I remained friendly with Claire after she left as MEP in 2019, and she invited me to her office for a cup of coffee and a chat. And I was chatting to her, and she, on the day the election was called, was actually with a government minister, a top minister, cabinet minister. And it became clear that the election was being called. And the minister that was with us said, no, it can't be. He's been told he's not to. So clearly, Rishi just decided, I don't care what they're doing, I'm going to have an election. And that's really messed it. It's messed it up for everyone. I mean, interestingly, in Rotherham now, we have no Tory candidate. We have a George Galloway candidate and a Labour candidate. And we have a Reform candidate who happens to be a barrister, very good chap. I hope we sneak through the middle and win that. We wouldn't have done if George Galloway wasn't standing, and we wouldn't have done if the Tories were standing, the vote would be a bigger split. But I think it's every possibility that it's all to play for. Well, I've read it, and on the face of it, it's great. Unfortunately, reading between the lines, I think it is full of local government platitudes about, oh, we're going to do lots for the environment and cycle lanes and walking and blah blah blah. I mean, there's some good things in there. As you know, no plans are usually 100% rubbish, but I honestly think that with the way the planning regulations are, with the way we nanny state and wokeism kicks into absolutely every part of our everyday lives, I think, to be honest with you, we need to kick some of those regulations out, which will give the people the opportunity to put ideas forward which would genuinely benefit the community. And I mean, Marple is a lovely place. I mean, if you compare it to Luton, where I spent some time recently, it's paradise. But that doesn't mean to say that it's without fault or without it can't be improved. I mean, I think every neighbourhood, everywhere across the whole country, should be trying to improve. And the people's opinion is what counts. But I'm not sure it's been wholly listened to. I don't think there's any chance of us joining the EU. I think that I don't care about the Conservative Party. We forgave them in 2019 and we stood down. The Brexit Party moved away and said, okay, you've said you're going to give us Brexit. They haven't given us Brexit. The civil servants that have tried to prevent Brexit should have been sent home on gardening leave. We have now a situation where the people are sick to death of the Conservative Party. I have not come across anyone on my travels, and I've been all over the UK because, as I say, I have a national role, and I've spoken to people who are former Conservatives and former Labour voters, and the confusion among the voters is unbelievable. I mean, I even met someone in Wakefield who voted Labour, but had he had PR, he would have voted for Britain. So, I mean, he was obviously of a far right mind, which, you know, is up to him. I mean, we've got freedom of choice and freedom of speech in this country. At least we keep telling ourselves we have. But he voted for a left-wing party. And that was because that was his best chance of getting rid of, making sure the Tories didn't get in. And I think that's where people are now. They really don't want the Tories at all. And I like the lad that's standing in Hazel Grove. He's a nice enough guy. But I think it's very unlikely that he's going to win. Well, we've got substantial unemployment as it is. We are a nation that is made up of immigrants. I'm quarter Irish. My name's John Kelly. We have quite a large number of people who descend from immigrants in our party. The notion that we have a net zero, if you like, so one in, one out, which is the policy that we have released today, that gives us some breathing space to actually start evaluating what we do. Because immigration is very, very important to this country. But what I think we have to remember is that this is a first-class economy. It's fourth largest exporter in the world. It's a big manufacturer. It's a very civilised place. I know we've got some issues with knife crime and other things that are causing problems for us, but we can address those. Because we are a first-class economy, we should demand, attract and encourage first-class skills to come here. We want first-class doctors, first-class nurses, first-class engineers. Those skills are always going to enhance our economy and always going to enhance our society. And I really don't care where they come from. I don't care what colour they are. I don't care what religion they are. But the people that we bring here should be top draw people. We don't need a few more pickpockets, and we don't need a few more benefit claimants. We've got plenty. Well, the party has always advocated an energy mix. And the reality is that all three of the mainstream political parties, Lib Dem particularly, Clegg was vehemently against any form of nuclear energy. And his argument was the cost of decommissioning. Now, the thing about decommissioning a nuclear plant is that it does cost, but that means it pays wages. I mean, you asked me earlier on about whether we should have a Trident replacement. That keeps us ahead of the technology. It may well be that we never ever need a nuclear deterrent, but I would not want to be in a position where we absolutely had lost it and we had no idea how to build one if we ever did need one. Similarly, with nuclear power for clean energy, we need to keep ahead of the game, and we are ahead of the game with technological leaders. We're also building 3 experimental nuclear fusion plants, which are full size, and quite clearly, nuclear fusion is the silver bullet for as far as energy is concerned. We will have limitless energy that's absolutely clean with no waste products, and we need to strive towards that. And if we can be the first country in the world to develop that, then that will benefit us greatly. Because I mean, I would love to rip the boiler out of my house and put an electric one in that runs off hydrogen, a nuclear fusion generator. That would be great. A heat pump doesn't work in this environment. A heat pump just doesn't work. I mean, the physics is it's either O or A level physics. It's probably A level physics these days. I certainly studied it. Adiabatic expansion, which is the principle on which heat pumps work. Yes, it gives you certain heat gain, but once you get down to temperatures of sort of 3-4 degrees, you might as well just plug electric fires in. It's that inefficient. And so I think that people are criticising our policy and saying, oh, it's got environmental issues. It doesn't have. It just means that we're going to use the resources that we have in order to develop the completely clean energy that we need to. Because frankly, things like wind farms, the reason why the fish stocks are going up in the Irish Sea is because of all the birds the wind farms are killing. It's because the birds aren't eating the fish. So there's always a knock-on effect. We've got all these experiments with tidal flow. As an ex-boat owner, I know that if you start messing with the tides, things happen, and they definitely do. We need to start looking at proper technology that can address. And if you look at energy needs, the perfect solution is nuclear with hydroelectric on a pump storage basis. So you pump water uphill overnight when the electricity demand is low, and then the following day, as soon as Coronation Street finishes and the kettles go on, you hit the button and you've got electricity being generated for free. Well, I personally think that in 2 years' time we'll probably be facing another general election, because I think we are likely to get some sort of Labour government. It's going to be a mess. They're going to carry on with the same woke policies that the Tories have had, except in some respects even worse. It may be that it's slanted towards making the less well off a bit happier and a bit better. But usually what happens with Labour governments is they come in and they inherit something that is fiscally sound, and they can borrow shed loads of money and fund all sorts of nonsense. For example, when Tony Blair got into power, he took the civil service from 100,000 to 700,000. And that creates an artificial boom, because you've got people on good salaries who are employing cleaners, who are having their groceries delivered, who are having their cars fixed. All kinds of stuff goes on. The economy can be made to boom artificially. But in the end, the truth of the matter is that Labour doesn't have the ability to borrow and borrow and borrow and borrow ad infinitum. And that coupled with the fact that we have had quantitative easing, which is inflationary in its nature, and it's only the lack of performance of the economy that has really kept inflation down. I think that we're going to be in trouble within 8 months, and we'll probably come to the end of a government within 2 years, and they'll have to go to the country because there will be so much unrest. Things like the CAS, I mean, we've got the Blade Runners in London smashing the cameras. It won't be long before that happens here. It wouldn't surprise me if the motorists, because the war on the car is a 40-year war. They've been trying to get rid of the motor car since Margaret Thatcher was in place. And it wouldn't surprise me if people eventually just simply unscrew their number plates and say, we've had enough. People are sick of it. Well, the EU was never about service anyway. The EU agreement was about manufactured goods. It wasn't ever about service. So the statistic is essentially false. As I've said, we've become the fourth largest manufacturer and fourth largest exporter since leaving the EU. If we are failing to get things into EU markets, there will always be backdoors, but we are we're essentially, it's them that are doing that, not us. We're not refusing to sell them things; they're refusing to buy things. The truth is that they need us more than we need them. They always did. What we paid into the EU, for every pound we put in, we got 37p back. And that 37p was ring fenced for spending on all kinds of things that they decided that we should spend it on. And when I say they, I mean the European Commission, because I have friends, I've got people in my phone book who were members of the European Parliament. Anne Widdecombe said to me a few weeks ago, there is nothing democratic about that organisation. The fact that we elect 758 MEPs, which we did do until we came out, is somewhat less now, because our 53 have gone. They have absolutely no say. They are told what they can vote on, and they can vote yes, no, or abstain. But the policies are dictated by the European Commission. And quite clearly, we have been the naughty boy of Europe. We have left, and so they want to punish us. But the truth of the matter is that this is an independent nation. It's got connections across the entire world. Our products are first class. Our services are first class. We sell all kinds of stuff all over the world. If you look at the map of where JCB in the north of England export to, it's enormous. We don't need a shrinking little economy called the EU that is hell-bent on taking on board every basket case economy that it can find and trying to boost it, because it's not been successful. I spent some time in East Germany after the wall came down. I went there because I worked in unemployment initiatives, and there were some wonderful people in the former East Germany. They were very, very hardworking. They had a completely different attitude to many of the people that you come across in Britain. But the reality is for them, even though they believed that jobs would come, the reality is that they ended up moving to the West. Those that wanted to make big money and get on with things, they just moved. And those that stayed live in a place where it's still very, very cheap to live. And lots of parts of the EU are rural and undeveloped. And the euro and the big experiment, and the thing that I think is eventually going to go horribly wrong for them, and we've got evidence that that's happening already, it's wasted a whole generation in Italy. The under 25s, 65% of them in the south of Italy are unemployed. That's not good. It's not something that it's not sustainable. It's not something that we can condone. And I think that, to be honest with you, I don't care what happens, because Europe it's a great place. Love Europe. Hate the EU. Look, we've had 40 years now of mismanagement of this country. We have a woke civil service that has been to woke universities, and they are not working in the interests of our people. They don't care. All of the mainstream parties and the Green Party, because the Green Party isn't a mainstream party, although there are some lovely people that are part of it, and they genuinely care about the environment, as do I. But the Lib Dems, Labour and Tories are almost identical. All you will vote for, if you vote for any of them, is more of the same. If you want to get your freedom back, then I would say this one thing. Lend us your vote. You don't have to vote for us forever. Lend us your vote and we will give you back your freedom.